Ladies and gentlemen, in the previous part, we've tried to explain the basic concepts of debits and credits and assets and liabilities and income and expense to you. By way of an example, we are just going to test your knowledge in this regard. You will see that on slide 9, there's a number of transactions that I've put down there. And I ask you not to do the ledger entries in this one because it's a long one. I just ask you to make sure that you understand the concept of debit and credit and income and expense, etc. To name the account that you will debit and the account that you will credit, just to test your knowledge in this regard. So once again, listen, do it yourself, and then make sure that you understand when I give you the example. So I would prefer you doing all the entries or do it one by one, then put on your DVD and listen to my explanation, and then you can take down my solution to the specific problem. So let's start from the top. Deposit 10,000 Rand in cash in the bank account of the practice. We also did an example like this in the previous example. What will we debit? We will debit our bank account and we will credit the capital account. Item number 2, pay office rent. What is office rent? Asset, liability, income, expense. It's an expense because you pay the office rent. You can't show anything in that regard at the end of the month. So what will we debit? We will debit rent and we will credit our bank account. Item number 3, pay for insurance. Once again, asset, liability, income, expense. Insurance is an expense. We will debit insurance and we will credit our bank account. Under item number 3, we pay for office furniture. Office furniture is an asset, so we will debit an account that we call office furniture and we will credit the bank account. We pay also for stationery. Once again, stationery and expense. Debit stationery and credit the bank account. The next one, item number 4, buy milk, tea, sugar, etc. What can we call this when we open our ledger account? Perhaps items like that we can call refreshments. So we will open a refreshment account and we will debit that because these items are also expenses. We use it up in the process and we will credit our bank account. The next item, number 5, buy stamps. We can call that item, if we need a name for our ledger account, postages. Once again, you will use the stamps as an expense, so we can debit postages and we will credit our bank account. The next item, 6, buy a fax machine on credit from OB Machines. We've got a fax machine now. We will open an account for, let's say, office equipment, and we will debit that account. And did we pay for that? No, we bought it on credit, so we will credit OB Machines. Item number 7, receive cash for services rendered. We receive the cash immediately. So we will debit our bank account and we will credit our professional fees, because professional fees is an income that'll increases. The next item, item 8, pay for a broken office window. It is actually repairs. It is actually just to put in a window for the broken one, so we can call it office repairs, or you can just call it repairs, and we will debit the account for repairs and we will credit our bank account. Receive cash for services rendered, it's actually exactly the same as item number 7. I'm not going to repeat that one. Item number 10, pay an advocate for a legal opinion. If you think about item number 10, there's perhaps 2 ways in which we can do this. Say for instance, there's a new Companies Act coming out and there's a section on loans for directors, and I want to increase my knowledge so that in future I can advise my clients on what's the implications and complications of this new section on loans to directors. In that scenario, that amount that I had to pay the advocate for his or her legal opinion is actually an expense. So what will I debit? I will debit legal opinion as an expense and I will credit the bank account. But ladies and gentlemen, say for instance, there's a client of mine that needs some information and I approach an advocate to give me that information on behalf of the client. Then I will debit my client because I will recover that amount from my client and I will credit my bank account. So just by way of a ledger account, let me just do the 2 scenarios for you. And I'm not going to do it in detail. The first one, my bank account, I will credit with that amount and I will debit a legal opinion because it's an expense account. In the second scenario, I will also credit my bank account, but that legal opinion is now on behalf of a client, so I will debit that client account with that amount to recover the money from the client. So in this instance, the legal opinion is an expense. In that instance, the client is an asset. The next item there, pay salary of a clerk. It's an expense account, the salaries, so we will debit salaries and we will credit our bank account. Item number 12, receive cash for services rendered, exactly the same also as item number 7, so you can just check that. Item number 13, buy legal books. If you think about legal books, you remember our earlier discussion on the difference between an asset and an expense and a liability. Legal books for an attorney will normally be the kind of books that you will use over a fairly long period of time. So legal books are actually not like stationery that you will use over a fairly short period of time and then throw it away or get rid of that. So legal books we will debit because legal books is an asset and you will credit the bank account. Item number 14, it's actually the same as item number 5, just check it there. Item number 16, send an account for services rendered to ELS. In this instance, we did not receive the money, so we will debit ELS. ELS is actually a debtor, and we will credit our professional fees. Item number 17, pay the bookkeeper. I think there's 2 scenarios again. If that bookkeeper is an external person, and I think that's how we will normally read this one. If it's an external bookkeeper that's rendering a service to you, you will credit the bank and you will debit bookkeeper's fee or accounting fees. So debit accounting fees and credit your bank. If, on the other hand, you argue that that bookkeeper is working permanently for your firm and he's just the bookkeeper there doing all the work, he will actually be seen as a person that you pay a salary to, and you can perhaps then, in that scenario, debit salaries and you can credit your bank. So if we go back to a transparency, if that person is an outside bookkeeper, you will credit your bank account and you will debit accounting fees. If that person is working permanently for your organization, that bookkeeper, once again you will credit your bank account and you will debit salaries. Both of these items, whether it's accounting fees or whether it's salaries, it will be an expense account. And the money paid out will be a decrease in the bank account. In other words, we decrease an asset with that amount. Withdrawal for private use, you remember in our example, we also did one like that. What should we debit? You can debit it immediately against the capital account, or if you want to, debit it against the drawing account, and in both instances you will credit your bank account. Pay wages, exactly the same as salaries, you will credit your bank account and you will debit your wages or salaries. Receive cash for services rendered from else. It's exactly the same as item number 7. In this instance, they do give you the name of the person, but he or she paid immediately. By telephone account, you will debit telephone cost. That is an expense account, and you will credit your bank account. Pay for a diary for appointments. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, the diary can be seen as an expense account. Why? Because normally after a year or how long you will throw that away. So it's exactly perhaps the same as stationery. So you can perhaps debit your stationery account and credit your bank account. Send an account to Erasmus for services rendered. It is exactly the same as the one item number 16, so we will debit Erasmus and credit our professional fees. By salary of a receptionist, we've covered that in our examples on salaries. Receive cash for services rendered, the same as item number 7 and some of the others. Pay for cleaning of office carpets. It's an expense account, so you will debit cleaning material or cleaning services and you will credit your bank account. Receive cash for services rendered, the same as 7 and all the others that we've done. Now, item 28. The check from else has been dishonored. In other words, that amount that we receive from else, there in item 20, it states they receive cash, but I guess it had been a cash check because now it seems that that amount had been dishonored. So in a situation like this, refer back to that specific item so you can draw a line between item number 28 and item number 20. Those two are actually related. So what will we do now? If we go back to item number 20, receive cash for services rendered by else. What did we debit? What did we credit? We debit our bank account with the amount, and we credit our professional fees with that amount. So, ladies and gentlemen, now that check had been RD'd by the bank. So, the long and the short of the story is that you don't have that money in the bank, because the bank will immediately credit the bank account. So, if we should do that transaction there in item number 28, we should credit the bank account, because that money is no longer in your bank account. The question is now, should we debit professional fees? Then, theoretically, we've cancelled this whole transaction if we should do that. But, ladies and gentlemen, perhaps that's why you're a lawyer. You can't just accept that you cancel this professional fees. In a situation like this, normally, you will try to recover this money from else. So what will we open? We will now open an account for else. We will credit our bank and we will debit this account of else. I hope that you all understand it. Also, ladies and gentlemen, on that date when you've rendered the service, that was actually a genuine fee. On a later stage only did that check had been RD'd. Erasmus went insolvent and no payment will be received. If you look at that item for Erasmus 23, and now we can link that to 29. Originally, when we did that transaction, we debit Erasmus with an amount of whatever, and we credit professional fees with that amount. So we debit Erasmus originally and we credit professional fees. Once again, perhaps the argument, we should credit Erasmus and perhaps debit professional fees. But the argument, ladies and gentlemen, that when you've rendered the service to Erasmus, that was actually, let's say, a bona fide transaction where you thought that he would pay you. So we can't actually cancel professional fees now and debit professional fees. Rather, let's open an account and we can call that bad debts. And we debit bad debts with that amount. In other words, bad debts, amounts that our debtors don't pay us. So in practice, you will show professional fees, but that will be eliminated by the amount of the bad debt, because you had to write off the amount that Erasmus will not pay to you. The next one, pay school fees of child. I think, ladies and gentlemen, that the child will refer to the child of the proprietor of this business. So this item will not be related to an expense or an asset or a liability for the business as such. It is exactly the same as a drawing, and we've done one there, item number 18, withdraw for private use. So we will do it exactly the same. We will credit the bank account and we will debit the capital, or as I've mentioned to you, if you want to, you can also debit the drawings account. Item 31, visit a client in Johannesburg and pay for the air ticket. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, we've got two options here. We can argue that this client contacted you and asked you to visit him in Johannesburg so that you do some work for him or her there in Johannesburg. In a situation like that, what will you do? You will credit you will credit your bank account. You will credit your bank account with the amount, and you will debit that specific client with the amount, because the client should repay you that money because you actually purchased that traveling ticket on behalf of the client. But if, say for instance, it's a big client of yours in Johannesburg, and at the end of the year or once or twice a year you visit that client for purposes of taking him out on a lunch and just for goodwill's sake, how will we do it then? We will credit our bank account, and perhaps we will debit traveling cost with that amount. So traveling cost will be what? An expense account, while the client will be an asset. So in this instance, an asset, and in that instance, a expense. So ladies and gentlemen, those items that I explain here, perhaps there's not enough information in the question, and we on purpose did it in that way so that you can argue and that you can see there's perhaps more than one possibility in dealing with a situation like that. The next one, enter into an agreement with a big company to give lectures to their staff on labor law during November 2014. If you think about that one, and the amount is 1,600 rand there, perhaps we would argue, I will credit my professional fees and I will debit the client. The client did not pay us in this instance, so perhaps we will debit the client and credit professional fees. But ladies and gentlemen, you remember earlier in our background information on accounting, we mentioned the prudence concept, and I also translate that as the aspect of, let's say, we are conservative. So if you look at the date there, the following are transactions of an attorney for October 2014. And here it states that you've entered into that agreement to render those services during November 2014. So from an accounting perspective, we've not rendered that service at this stage. And you remember, in that explanation, I also mentioned to you that we should make sure that our chickens had been born. So we are only delivering or going to deliver this service during November. So in this example, there is no accounting entry. Item number 13, office equipment to an amount of 1,000 that has been stolen. Send a claim to the insurance company for the amount. What will we do? That one asset is gone now, the office equipment. So we will have to credit the office equipment and we will debit the insurer, that company. Not insurance, because by definition insurance is the expense account. So we will debit that specific company that's owing us that money. Pay OB machines the amount. We will credit our bank account and we will debit OB machines. Alice pays 50% of the outstanding amount. We will debit the bank account and we will credit the person here, Alice. Pay a traffic fine. Ladies and gentlemen, this one we must think about. The traffic fine will be in regard to something that had been against the law. So in other words, what will happen here? Somebody park on a spot where he or she could not park, or drive too fast in a street. The point is also that normally, and we are not working for such in an accounting practice, But normally SARS will not allow a traffic fine like this. So if the proprietor drove that vehicle or made the error here, we should do what? We will credit the bank account and we will debit the capital account. If it's one of the clerks or another person working there, what will we have to do? We will have to debit that person so that he or she pays back that money. We can't just take that item and debit it against traveling cost. Receive an invoice from AF3 for law books purchase. We will debit our law books asset and we will credit AF3. Take a client to lunch and pay. Perhaps we will debit what account? Entertainment cost, and we will credit our bank account. Buy polish to clean office furniture. We will credit our bank account and debit cleaning material. Represent Evan in a court case and send an account. We will debit Evan and we will credit professional fees. Ladies and gentlemen, on Transparency 9, we did some examples on the basic principles of accounting. And I hope that at this stage you are comfortable with the debits and credits and assets and liabilities and income expense. Please go back and redo the examples and make sure that you are comfortable with this. If we move back to slide 8, one of the things that you must also know, and that is the so-called closing or balancing of an account. On this slide, there's an example of a bank account with information on. Don't worry about the detail there. There's debits and credits. Normally what we should do at the end of the month, we should balance off our accounts. Now there's debits and there's credits, and if I should ask you, what's the amount available in the bank? Do we have money in the bank, or are we owing the bank a certain amount? Then just by looking at that account, you will not be in a position to answer that question. So how are we going about to balance an account? We can add the amounts on the debit side and we can add the amounts on the credit side and take the difference between the two to determine the balance on an account. So if you add up the debits, I'm just going to write it up there. If you add up this debits, it adds up to, if I'm not mistaken, 5,600 rand. If you add up the credits, it adds up to 2,100 rand. So in accounting, we've got a specific way to balance of an account. The bigger one, if I may put it like that, of the two amounts is 5,600 rand. So let's write there 5,600 rand and we write there 5,600 rand. But ladies and gentlemen, immediately you will tell me this is not correct because that amount or those three amounts don't add up to 5,600 rand. So what will we do? We will deduct that 2,100 rand there, and if we deduct it there, we will get an amount of 3,500 rand. So that is actually the balance on our account. So what will we do? We will write here on the side where the amount is the smallest, we will write in there 3,500 rand and we will write there balance, and we will bring down our balance on the other side, 3,500 rand, and we will write there balance. So ladies and gentlemen, balancing of an account is actually doing a debit and a credit entry. So if, for instance, this example of the bank account was for November of this year. So for November, we've got these transactions, and now on the 1st of December, our opening balance for our bank account is 3,500 Rand again. So at the end of the month, normally we will balance off all these accounts. Just for background purposes, it's actually not a thing that you will be examined on, but just to complete this, if I might call it a cycle of accounting, all your income and expense accounts will be closed off to, and I'm using the older terminology, the income statement or the income and expenditure account to determine the profit for the period. After a year or after 6 months or a quarter, you will take all your income accounts, all your expense accounts, you will balance it off to determine whether your organization was profitable. And then the balances of the assets and the liabilities will be shown. And once again, I'm using the older terminology because perhaps you know that. Those items will be shown in the so-called balance sheet. You can just take note of that. That is actually the ultimate purpose of accounting, to draw up those accounts so that you can also from that take certain decisions. Ladies and gentlemen, in Module 1, I've tried to, in a brief way, gave you the background purposes to accounting, to give you some information on assets and liabilities and income and expense, and to give you some concepts in accounting. In our last module, we will touch on a very, very important aspect for you as an attorney, and that is the aspect of trust and business concepts. The objective here, as I've put it there, to explain to you what the differences between trust and business are. And you remember in my opening remarks, I've mentioned to you that as an attorney, you've got the privilege to receive trust money from clients. And according to your laws, as an attorney, you may accept trust money. But from that concept, there's also a number of responsibilities on you because, ladies and gentlemen, as an attorney, you are now working with trust money that does not belong to you. And sorry for this comment, but I think if you do some reading on your profession, the reason for attorneys to be taken off the so-called role of attorneys, that is for tampering or stealing, if I might put it like that, trust money belonging to other people. So the whole concept of trust money and the business concept, very, very important. So first of all, a client can pay money over to you as an attorney in a trust capacity, or let's say in a trust situation. And that money is not an asset of the attorney or the firm of attorneys. So ladies and gentlemen, the very important aspect is that trust money, and you see I've bolded it there, and business money should be kept separately. At least, as an attorney, when you start your practice, you should open 2 bank accounts. It's of the utmost importance that trust money and business money should be kept separately, because the trust money should be balanced in a certain way, and that trust money you should keep separately from your business money. Normally, ladies and gentlemen, the trust receipt should be issued to a person whenever he or she pays in money, and that you are actually just keeping that money on behalf of a client. Let's use a practical example. Whenever a person wants to purchase a property, a house or a flat or a whatever, he or she will normally pay in the money to you as the attorney, and at a later stage you will have to pay that money after deducting your costs and your fees, and you will have to pay that money over to the seller of the property. So that money is actually trust money. There's many other examples, but let's stick to that one. So, ladies and gentlemen, trust payments are also payments that you can do on behalf of a client from the trust cash book. So, let's just summarize this. Whenever you render a service, you should always only then, after rendering the service, transfer that money to your business cash book. Or whenever you had to pay back a client, you can pay back that trust money directly to the client. Let's say, for instance, I want to buy a property and I pay you R1 million and you keep that money on trust for me, but at a later stage we cancel the purchasing contract. Then you can pay back that money to me from that trust money. Or the third option there, whenever you receive instruction from that client to pay somebody else on behalf of a client. In the situation of the buying of a property, the buyer of that property can perhaps instruct you to pay the estate agent, to pay perhaps the municipality for water and electricity or whatever. In those instances, you may also pay from the trust money. So let's just summarize. Whenever I'm entitled to the money, I've done some work to the client, then I can pay over the trust money from the trust bank account to my business bank account, or let's say my business cash book. Or I can pay the client's money back to the client, or I receive instruction from the client and pay a specific person on his or her behalf. Then, fees or services that I receive or money that I've paid, I should make sure whether that's a business transaction or a trust transaction before I decide how I should account for that. The next three there that I've also bold, fees earned can be transferred from the trust bank account to the business bank account when I'm entitled to that fees, and we will also do practical examples in this regard. Trust creditor, whenever a person pays in trust money to me, we can call that person a trust creditor, and a trust creditor must always reflect a credit balance or a zero balance. In other words, a trust creditor can never ever reflect a debit balance. If there's a trust creditor with a debit balance on, there must be something wrong. There's a problem that you as the attorney will have to sort out. I will also do in my practical examples aspects on that. Your trust cash book may never reflect a credit or let's say an overdraft balance. There should always be money in the trust cash book. And ladies and gentlemen, to summarize here, the money that you owe to your trust creditors must be reflected in your trust cash book. In other words, if I receive from Mr. A 10,000 Rand and from Mr. B 20,000 Rand, I should have money in my trust cash book to at least the value of 30,000 Rand. To put it in other words for you, I must repay the trust creditors immediately when they require me to pay back that money. So the point is, ladies and gentlemen, that the trust money should be equal or perhaps more than the money that I owe to my trust creditors. So ladies and gentlemen, against that background, there's an example. And in my examples, I will use the scenario of you as the attorney rendering a service to a client regarding the divorce case. I want to get divorced, and you as the attorney give him, let's say, a quote, and you tell him that the cost of this work will be, say, 20,000 rand, and you ask him to pay in that 20,000 rand to you. And then you do the work for him, and after that, you then account to your client, and you will then tell the client that you owe me now 20,000 or 18 or whatever. So that's the background. I'm not going to repeat it, but that's the scenario that we will use. It's about receiving money on behalf of a divorce case where you had to render the service at a later stage. So the first one, you received 10,000 in cash from A. We will open, ladies and gentlemen, a trust cash book, and we will debit that amount in our trust cash book because it's trust money, 10,000 rand, and we will open an account for A, and in brackets we will put a T there to indicate that this account is for A but in a trust capacity. So we will credit a trust with 10,000 rand, and you remember we should cross-reference. Let's say that is our first transaction. I will write there a trust, and I will write there trust cash book. So that's a trust transaction, and we've received that in cash. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you send an account of 8,000 rand to A. That is not a cash transaction, and as we've seen in the previous module, we will open a journal entry for non-cash transactions. So by way of a journal entry, we will debit A because A actually owes me that money, and that 8,000 rand is my professional fees. So by way of a journal entry, I will debit A, but I will put a little B in brackets. Why? Because the sending out of an account and the rendering of service is by nature a business transaction. So I will debit a business with 8,000 rand, and I will credit my professional fees with 8,000 rand. I will then book over or post over those transactions. So I will open an account for a business, and I will debit a business with 8,000 rand, and I will credit professional fees with 8,000 rand. Here I will write a business, and there I will write professional fees. So I've done the posting of that amounts. So ladies and gentlemen, if you now look at a trust and a business, A is actually the same person. In this capacity, A is in a business capacity. In that capacity, A is in a trust capacity. And the question tells you that you send the account to A, the whole thing is completed now, and you'll have to settle this whole scenario here. So ladies and gentlemen, if you look at this situation, if you look at a trust, A actually, if you just look at this account, actually is a trust creditor. You owe a 10,000 rand. If you look at this scenario, a business is a business debtor. He owes you money. So the point that I want to raise here, and that is the concept of setting off of amounts. If, for instance, I owe you 200 rand and you owe me 250 rand, should I pay you 200 rand and you pay me 250 rand, or can we just set off the two amounts against each other? And I think that's the easiest way. In other words, I will just pay you 50 rand and then we are quits. So that concept of balancing off or setting off of two amounts, we are going to use that here. So if we set off the two amounts against each other, we don't receive cash. So again, it's not a cash transaction. We will have to open a journal entry for that. So we'll have to credit a business and we'll have to debit a trust to set off the amount. So a trust we will debit and a business we will credit. The question is now, ladies and gentlemen, what should we take, 8,000 rand or 10,000 rand? In this scenario, there's just an amount of 8,000 rand that A owes me, so we should use that amount. A trust debit 8,000 rand and a business credit 8,000 rand. Let's post that over or book it over. We will debit a trust with 8,000 rand and credit a business with 8,000 rand. Here we will write, say, item number 2, a business, and there we will write a trust. Now, if you look at a business at this stage, that account balance off. So we don't have to worry about that account anymore. If, ladies and gentlemen, you look at a trust there, there's a credit of 10,000 rand, there's a debit of 8,000 rand, so we still owe an amount of 2,000 rand. What will we do? We will have to pay that money back to A. How will we do that? By way of paying him that money from the trust cash book. A trust 2,000 rand, and we will write there 2,000 rand, and here we will write trust cash book 2,000 rand. So if you now look at a trust account, that account will also balance off. If you now look at your trust cash book, you will see, if you balance that there's 10,000 rand on the debit side, there's 2,000 rand on the credit side, so there's 8,000 rand on a balance on this account. What can we now do? We can now transfer that money from the trust cash book to our business cash book. So what entry will we do here? We will do the following entry. We will open a business cash book and we will debit our business cash book with 8,000 rand and we will credit our trust cash book with 8,000 rand. We can put in a 4 there if you want to indicate that it was actually entry number 4. And we can put entry number 4 there, and there we will cross-reference to trust cash book. So if you look at your trust cash book, that account will also balance off. So what's the situation here? The trust cash book, the A trust account, and the A business account balance off, all of them. There's the money in my business cash book and it's been reflected as a income. Debit my business cash book, credit my professional fees. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you can ask me, in this instance, why did I receive 10,000 rand from A, but I only charge him 8,000 rand? I think the practical or a practical answer for that may be that I do an estimate. I draw up a balance. And I've decided that perhaps this court case will take 5 hours and I'm working at 2,000 an hour, so I charge him 10,000 rand. But then it actually took less time in court because we can't exactly determine that beforehand. So in this instance, the service that I've rendered was actually less than the amount that I've collected from A by way of the trust money, and that's why I had to pay him back. I've got money in excess and I had to pay him back that 2,000 rand. Ladies and gentlemen, if we move over to item or to slide number 14, just also to repeat, trust creditors, those are the people that you receive money and it's not your money, and a trust creditor's account may never have a debit balance and there should only be a credit balance. And I've also mentioned that the trust bank account should have a positive balance and that the trust money should be the same or more than the total amount that you owe to your trust creditors, just by way of once again giving that information to you. So there's our next example. You receive 15,000 rand in cash from C. Once again, it's in connection with a divorce case, and then after the situation had been through the court, you send an invoice of 18,000 rand now to C. Let's do this example in our accounting records. You receive 15,000 in cash from C. We will open a trust cash book. You will debit your trust cash book with 15,000 rand, and you will open a C account, and we will put in brackets T because it's C in a trust capacity, the 15,000. Let's call it item number 1. Here we will write C trust account, and there you will write trust cash book. You send an invoice to C for 18,000 rand. On sending that invoice or your statement, that is not a cash transaction, so you will have to open a journal account. Our journal account will read the following. C business, we will debit with 18,000 rand. And we will credit professional fees with 18,000 rand. Let's book that over or post it over to our ledger accounts. C business, we will debit with 18,000 rand and we will credit professional fees with 18,000 rand. We can write there 2 if you want to. Here we will cross-reference professional fees. There you will cross-reference C business. So ladies and gentlemen, if we look at the situation now, you've got a C business of 18,000 and a C trust of 15,000. You remember the previous example where we've mentioned to you, in a situation like this, you can repay C his 15,000 and you can then ask him to pay you 18,000. But ladies and gentlemen, that will perhaps not be the reason for you receiving trust money. And you remember we've explained the setting off of amount. So in other words, we will have to set off C business against C trust. So what will we do? That is not a journal entry. That is not a cash entry, so we will not record it in our trust cash book. We will record it in a journal. So what will we do? We will debit C trust with an amount, and we will credit C business with an amount. What will that amount be? If you look at C trust, there's only 15,000 rand available there. So we can't use 18,000 to set off this to. We will have to use 15,000. So we will debit C trust with 15, and we will credit C business with 15,000 rand. Let's post or book that over to our accounts. We will debit C trust 15,000 rand, and we will write here C business, and we can number that as number 3. Here we will write C trust 15,000 rand. So ladies and gentlemen, if we move to C trust, what do you see there? C trust balance off. So we can draw 2 lines there. If you now look at C business, what's the situation there? There's still a debit balance on C business of 3,000 rand. So ladies and gentlemen, what happened in this scenario? You did an estimate, you did a balance, a budget, and you determined that this divorce case will cost C 15,000 rand. But because you had to spend perhaps more time in the courtroom, and you can't just quit the court case at that stage, you carry on, but now this person owes you 18,000 rand. So there's still 3,000 rand that C owes you in a business capacity. So what can we do now? We can transfer that money that we've actually, let's say, earned in this transaction to our business cash book. So we can credit our trust cash book 15,000 rand, open a business cash book, and debit our business cash book with 15,000 rand. We can make that item 4, and we write the business cash book, and we can write the trust cash book. So ladies and gentlemen, if you look at the trust cash book, that cash book also balance off. If you look at your business cash book, you've not received the full amount of 18,000 rand there. You've only received 15,000 rand, but C in a business capacity is still owing you 3,000 rand. So ladies and gentlemen, if you compare the 2 examples here, in this example, you've received trust money to the value of 10,000 rand, but your fee was actually 8,000 rand. So you had to repay 2,000 rand. In this second scenario, you receive 15,000 rand, but your invoice had been 18,000 rand. So you receive less money from C than the total fee that you've earned. So in this one, you can't repay the client some of the money. In this instance, the client still owes you that 3,000 rand, but now in a business capacity. If I may put this in other words to you, You will normally receive trust money so that you make sure that there's possibly no bad debts. You remember in a previous example, we've dealt with bad debts. But perhaps he is a good client of yours and you did your estimate and you do your budget and you've budgeted 15,000 rand, but now the court case took longer and you carry on and now he owes you 18,000 rand. So you can transfer the whole amount that you've received originally to your business cash book, but now he or she owes you still in a business capacity that money. And ladies and gentlemen, if he should repay you that money, what will we do? If he repays you that 3,000 rand, we will credit C business with 3,000 rand and we will debit the business cash book with 3,000 rand. So then the whole amount of 18,000 will be recorded in your business cash book.